This guy spent 20 years working as a mechanical engineer for minimum wage, and in all that time he never even held a girl's hand. Then one day after another brutal shift at work, his heart finally gives out. The doctors do everything they can, but it's game over, or so he thought. Because the next moment, he opens his eyes as a prince in a medieval fantasy world called Eldria, where magic is real, castles are everywhere, and gorgeous maids are eager to do anything for him. A week later, Jin, now named Rain, is handed some tea by a household maid named Leah, and he thanks her for it. By now, he understands his position, he died, and he became this man. Rain Edgar, third son of Grand Duke Illyrian Edgar, with an elder brother and an elder sister. Memories flash past his mind of his siblings feeding him magic water when he was much younger, and he remembers the times his mother made the jacket he's wearing right now. Rain is the youngest child of the family, adored by everyone. He wonders if this is some sort of remedy for his terrible last life. This continent is called Eldria, a world where all facilities rely on magic to function, and the Kurdoral Empire is the largest human empire on this continent, with elves and dwarves living here too. The Edgar family rules a territory of about 300,000 square kilometers with roughly 1 million subjects. As a noble, not only does Rain have great clothes, he also has a personal maid to serve him. He reasons that such a happy life must be the result of his hard work in his past life. Suddenly, Leah asks Master Rain to come with her. The Lord has something to discuss with him. Shortly after, the young master enters his father's office, and his father asks him if he knows why he was called. Confused, Rain says he doesn't know. So Illyrian explains that Rain has reached the age to manage his own territory, and asks if he's decided where he'd like to go. The territory is in the northwest, relatively safe, but food production has been difficult due to a shortage of magicians. The Grand Duke further explains that although their land is secure, the future of the Kurdoral Empire is not so optimistic. Rain agrees with his father's deductions. The royal family is in decline, political corruption is rampant, and open and covert conflicts between the Empire's lords are countless. Considering all the care he's experienced, Rain decides he won't lose the people who care about him. When his father feels like he's pressuring him too much, he suggests that the rest of the family can handle it, but Rain interjects and asks if the safety of the territory will improve once the food problem is resolved. Surprised, Illyrian explains that food issues can't be resolved just by enthusiasm, and asks him to take things step by step. Illyrian says this because he feels Rain is still a child who thinks it's a simple problem. But our guy isn't relying merely on passion, he's relying on the wisdom of centuries of human industrial revolution. Eventually, he assures his father that he'll take care of the issue himself. By the way, there's a city called Ealing City, the westernmost land of Grand Duke Illyrian's territory. To the north, it borders the enemy Sauron Grand Duke's land. To the west, it borders the territory of the elves, and to the south lies the vast ocean. Due to its location at the intersection of three nations, Ailing City is often engulfed in the flames of war. Frequent warfare has left what was once fertile land barren, and the population is dwindling with people barely surviving. Sometime later, Rain heads to Ealing City with his maid Leah. While traveling, he considers that the necessary prerequisite for an industrial revolution is a sufficient labor force, so he needs a way to increase the population. Apart from that, he seems to have gained some kind of ability called a scanning ability, which allows him to clearly observe the stats of the person being scanned. He tested it on members of his family and gained a rough understanding of this world's people. His first priority upon arriving at the territory is to recruit talented individuals. Meanwhile, Leah looks disturbed as she recalls how the Lord asked her to keep an eye on the young master. At the Ealing City Lord's Mansion, the city lord tells a veiled superior that the Grand Duke's youngest son will be arriving in the city today and asks whether they should act. But the veiled superior tells him to hold off any actions until they receive an instruction from the master. Disturbed, the Lord reminds him that Rain can discover his tax and financial fraud. But the man assures him that a pampered young master like Rain wouldn't understand tax and financial records, and proposes giving him some random accounts to confuse him. Then he takes his leave so the city lord can go greet the young master. Before the man leaves, he mutters to himself that it's time for Illyrian to pay for his crimes. Shortly after, Rain arrives in the city and confirms his suspicions that the once cultivable land has become desolate because of the lack of population. He collects a map of the area from Leah and immediately starts to consider dredging a river to the west and building a canal connecting it to the southern port. While he's planning, he hears a girl pleading with her father to stop gambling with the little money reserved for her mother's treatment. When she refuses to let go of the money, the man raises his hands and threatens to beat her, but he's soon launched backward by a punch from an angry Rain. He looks at his hand for a while, but he feels the backlash when his fragile royal hands begin to hurt, since he's in a new body. Leah quickly comes to check on his hands and asks him to inform her next time so she can prepare protective gear. He tells her it's fine and asks her to check on the girl while he goes to have a word with the scumbag. When he walks up to the man, he asks if he's insane for using his family's saved up money to gamble and even hitting his daughter for it. The trembling man asks who he is. Rain tells him that who he is doesn't matter. What matters is that he'll have someone chop off his head if he ever finds out he's gone to the casino again. Scared, the man swears to never gamble again and runs away with tears in his eyes. Eventually, Rain asks the girl if she's okay and decides to check her state with his system. She thanks him because the money for her mother's treatment was saved, but Rain is struck by her stats. Apparently, she's a 17-year-old girl named Lillian Eldry with a special attribute related to farming and harvesting. Even though her stats aren't high, Rain decides that he has to recruit her because her holy body of agriculture will be vital for future farming. He quickly offers to take her in their carriage, but the young lady protests that she's dirty and would soil his carriage. However, Rain blankly states that the carriage is just a few wooden planks put together as a form of transport, so it's no big deal. He also asks her how there's even a casino around here with such severe poverty. It turns out the enemy Grand Duke of Sauron attacked the town last fall and killed many soldiers, and this spring a great flood destroyed much of the land and crops. The lives of citizens have become hellish, and even finding a meal has become troublesome. As Rain walks through the impoverished streets with Lillian and Leah, he reasons that he must run a census to determine the number of productive forces they have. First, he decides to go to the Elling City Lord's estate to see how much petty cash is lying around to use as development funds. He asks Lillian if she knows where the Lord's estate is, but before she can reply, a man on a horse rides through the street and whips the people to get out of the way, calling them peasants so as not to get overrun. Leah quickly pushes Rain out of the way and holds him in her embrace as they both jump aside. She holds for a bit too long and doesn't realize she's muffling his breathing. Finally, she lets go of him and checks if he's been hurt, and he assures her that he's fine thanks to her help. Annoyed, Rain asks Lillian if she knows who the man is, so she informs him that the guy is the young master of the Eldwin family, the family that owns all the casinos in Ealing City. Amused by that, Rain asks if the family is rich. Lillian answers with a stutter that they are, which makes Rain glad that he'll be able to raise the development fund off them. Immediately, he asks Lillian to lead them to the casino, but she pleads with him not to go there because they'll scam him out of all his money. She thinks the young master wants to gamble, but he assures her that the casino can't beat him. Soon after, they arrive at the casino, and Rain fantasizes about how it's going to get annihilated by his industrialized production line. When he steps in, he finds a man pleading for 10 gold coins because he can make it back, while another man who thought he had won gets played. Rain reasons that people will never work properly as long as casinos exist. Suddenly, Leah informs him that the soldiers have surrounded the casino and asks if he wants to take action now. However, he asks her to wait for the big fish first before taking action. When Rain approaches one of the workers in the casino, the man asks him what he'd like to play, so Rain asks him to suggest an easy game, since he's just playing around. Excited, the man leads him to a table where they're playing a game called Sick Bow, and hands him 2 chips on the house so he can try his luck. Rain immediately tosses the chips and they land on the small box, which causes the worker and the man at the table to smirk at each other. When the guy opens the dice, it displays a large instead, so Rain loses the game. Annoyed by how uninteresting the game is, Rain tells Leah it's time to go because he's hungry. Suddenly, the man stops Rain and states that he can only leave once he pays them the money he owes. Confused, Rain asks when he owed them any money, so the guy explains that he lent him the 2 chips and that he has to pay back the money first. When Rain reminds him that he just said it's on the house, the man mentions that he must be joking since nothing is free in a casino. Apparently each chip is worth 100 gold, but including the service charge and interest, Rain now owes him 250 gold. He proposes that Rain leave his maid here if he didn't bring any cash with him today, but Lillian immediately accuses him of lying. She quickly explains to her master that each token is only worth 1 silver coin and that the guy is lying through his teeth. Annoyed that the girl has ruined his plans, he calls her a bastard and tries to get someone to beat her up. But the words don't fully come out of his mouth when Rain knocks him several feet backward with a punch to the mouth. After the guy crashes into a nearby game table with his back, Rain asks him who permitted him to talk. Our guy turns to the people fighting over some tokens nearby, and he considers how hopeless the people are. Shortly after, the young master of the Eldwin family, Verlo, enters and asks who dares cause a mess in the casino, and Rain is glad the big fish has arrived. Verlo finds some guys who had spilled tokens on the ground, so he orders his guards to beat up the peasants and make them know their place. Even though the men plead that they've learned from their mistakes, the guards don't spare them, but pummel them into the ground. Everyone else watches in shock, and Verlo threatens to dish out the same punishment to everyone if they don't behave. Meanwhile, Lillian blames herself for bringing Rain and Leah to such a place and letting them get scammed, and she recalls how Master Rain had just paid a doctor to go save her mother, so she decides to find a way to pay him back. She immediately defiantly tells Verlo that she won't let him scam her big brother. The scared onlookers realize she's toast for speaking up to Verlo, who is a terror in the land. Verlo turns to her, and she repeats that his casino scammed everyone and has destroyed countless families, so she won't let him bully her big brother and sister. Enraged, Verlo raises his hand to slap her, and the girl prepares for the impact she knew would come. But she doesn't feel anything and realizes that Rain had held back his hand. When Rain scans the young master, he realizes his stats are bad and his loyalty score is just 5, which makes him careful because that means the Eldwin family can start a revolt anytime. Surprised, Verlo asks him what his deal is, and Rain admits that he agrees that only the strong survive in this world. Whoever wins the fight gets the final laugh. That amuses Verlo, and he asks Rain how he would dare go against him and if he knows who he is. But our guy says the only thing he needs to know is that he'll win the fight now, so he'll get the final laugh, because his words are law. With a clap of his hands, a group of soldiers enters the casino and suspends all their activities. Meanwhile, the important men in the city, along with the city lord, gather in a banquet hall to await the arrival of Master Rain. And one man hopes to entreat Rain by giving him his daughter. A man named Adrian, father to Verlo, considers that the man is only trying to leech off the Grand Duke with his daughter, and recalls how he had secretly told the city lord to scare Rain a little during the banquet. He wonders why Verlo isn't here so they can build a relationship with the Grand Duke's son, especially since they can't trust the trash city lord. Shortly after, young Master Rain enters, and 2 men approach him to entreat him with gifts and one of their daughters. However, Rain proposes that they start the meeting if everyone is here, and immediately asks the servants to bring in a whiteboard. As the men wonder what the imagery on the board is, our guy explains that it's a blueprint he drew this afternoon of a dam that they're going to construct. The clueless men all wonder what a dam is, but Rain explains by pointing out that there's a great flood every year due to the river north of this city. But a dam can stop the flood during the rainy seasons and water their crops during the droughts. Intrigued, Adrian considers it an excellent idea that can boost their crop production, and he realizes the Grand Duke's son isn't a simpleton after all. Confused, the men ask Master Rain what any of this has to do with them, so he excitedly explains to them that all construction work requires money. Immediately, the men sadly declare that they're also poor. Adrian quietly thinks to himself that Rain is quite naive to think he can get these vampires to fund him. However, our guy refuses to accept that they're poor, and mentions how he was able to get 50,000 gold coins from the casino he raided. When Rain asks where the other casinos are in the city, the men are shocked to hear that he raided the casino. They wonder if it's the one they invested in that he raided, or if they'll get their monthly share. It turns out that all of Ealing City's casinos are run by Master Adrian, which means the young master is going to run into trouble. Adrian also considers Rain a stupid fellow, but he now decides to destroy him. Immediately, he steps forward and accuses Rain of breaking the laws of the Empire by raiding the casino. The other men chime in to support him. Because the casinos are legal businesses, suddenly Rain reminds them that they pretended to be poor when he asked for donations, but he declares that he knows everything about their involvement with the casinos, so he gives them one last chance, either give up the donations now or he'll take them. Threatened, Adrian asks what the Grand Duke will think of his actions here. The men agree that he's breaking his father's law, amused that they want to talk about the law. Rain orders his soldiers to bring out the men he detained so he can really talk with them about the law. The soldiers bring out 2 men they had apprehended from the casino, and Adrian is shocked to see these men who were always next to Verlo. Rain asks Adrian if he recognizes the men, but he denies having ever seen them before. Eventually, he demands to know what this means. So Rain assures him that there's no need to be alarmed, but it's only that these men tried to assassinate him this afternoon. He further adds that the men stated that they have the greatest power in Ealing City because they have someone great in the city backing them up, and the mention of that makes Adrian tense. Eventually, Rain asks the guard to untie them to see if they recognize anyone at the party, but the men at the party immediately recognize the men as Verlo's followers, which means Adrian would get penalized for their attempt to assassinate the Grand Duke's son. Realizing that allowing the 2 men to speak will destroy his entire family, Mr. Adrian quickly brings out a knife and attacks the scoundrels. With one swift movement, he slits both their throats and they drop dead in a pool of blood. He quickly explains that he did it out of anger that the men would dare do such a thing, and he asks the young master to hand out to him any punishment he sees fit. However, Rain doesn't act out and assures Adrian that he's a great noble for having such a strong sense of justice. After the compliment, he asks the soldiers to bring out the main culprit, to see if there are other excellent nobles like Adrian that would deal with him too. It turns out to be Verlo, who screams at the soldiers as they drag him in, and threatens that he'll get his dad, who is the greatest noble in Ealing, to kill them all. Shocked, Adrian realizes that the reason he hadn't been able to reach Verlo is because he was captured. As the young man is dragged forward, he calls Rain insulting names and threatens to torture and kill him for killing his servants. Intrigued, Rain publicly asks him if he truly wants to torture him, in addition to his desire to get him killed, and the stupid Verlo loudly states that he's going to do it, and no one in Ealing can stand against him. Excited, Rain congratulates Verlo for his bravery, and he turns to ask Mr. Adrian what he thinks of the boy's bravery. When Verlo notices his dad standing nearby, he excitedly calls Rain a brat and assures him he's in trouble because of who his dad is. As he's about to talk about his dad, Mr. Adrian calls him an ungrateful child and shuts him up. He immediately asks Verlo to kneel, and the confused young man asks him what's going on. When he doesn't respond, Adrian forcefully makes him kneel, and he pleads with young Master Rain to spare his son because he's young and naive, and even offers to give all of his possessions. Immediately, Verlo recalls how his father had implored him to get close to the Grand Duke's son, and he soon adds 1 and 1 together. Frantic, he asks Rain if he's the Grand Duke's son, so Rain asks him why else he would have so many soldiers. Shocked, he immediately bows and pleads for forgiveness, because he has made a grave mistake, and Mr. Adrian joins in to plead with the boy. To prove his sincerity, Adrian goes on his knees and declares that his Eldwin family pledges their allegiance to him. So Rain orders him to hand over everything he earned illegally over the years, so he can ensure his safety. Glad that he's been saved, Adrian thanks him for the offer, and he immediately decides to rat out the City Lord too. He quickly tells Master Rain that the City Lord, Eldritch, has contacted exterior forces in an attempt to betray the Grand Duke, and everyone turns their attention to the City Lord in shock. Oddly, Rain replies angrily and accuses Adrian of slandering and speaking ill of the City Lord's loyalty, so he immediately orders the soldiers to execute the Eldwin family. Excited by the young master's stupidity and impulsiveness, Eldritch thanks Rain for his quick wits and actions, and declares that he's completely loyal to him and the Grand Duke, and would never think of rebellion. So Rain reassures him that he believes he would never betray him, even though he can clearly see that his loyalty status is just 15, and his special attribute is greed. That evening, Rain checks the numbers and realizes that the nobles have turned in more than 100,000 gold, which is about 2 years' worth of tax that Ealing receives. While he's working, Leah comes to give him some tea. He tells her about how absolutely fed up these nobles are. Suddenly, she asks what he's planning to do about what Adrian said concerning how the City Lord is planning a rebellion, because that would mean his life is in danger. However, Rain assures her that there's no need to worry, because he's certain that Eldritch is planning to rebel, but he can't show his hand at the moment. Surprised, she asks why, so he says it's because he hasn't figured out who's working for him in Ealing. For now, he's exposed and his enemies are in the shadows, so acting rashly will only cause chaos. He'd rather they consider him a naive and ignorant rich boy, so he can get to the bottom of it. The next day, City Lord Eldritch meets with a wizard and a guildmaster named Malcolm. Malcolm is entirely annoyed by the reforms Master Rain has brought to the town. Eldritch attempts to calm the guildmaster, claiming that Rain is a young man who's trying to prove himself to the Grand Duke. But Malcolm refuses and claims that even the Grand Duke would have to show wizards respect when he talks to them. In truth, Eldritch is excited by Malcolm's anger. He's glad that Rain has brought trouble on himself with the recruitment letter he issued for his water conservancy project. Still annoyed, Guildmaster Malcolm proceeds to have a word with Rain, and Eldritch pretends to try to stop him, but he's actually glad that the magical guild has turned against Rain. Shortly after, while Rain is in his office working on engineering drawings, he's told that the guildmaster would like to meet him. But our guy doesn't know who Leah is referring to. Eventually, when he steps out, Malcolm demands to know the meaning of the letter he sent and why he would insult the Wizards Guild, so a confused Rain asks him what he's talking about. Annoyed, Malcolm tells him to stop acting clueless and shows him the terms in his recruitment letter that stop applications from individuals who are wizards, physically disabled, or elderly. When Rain reads the terms he wrote, he still doesn't see what the problem is, since he's building a dam. But Malcolm states that refusing applications from wizards is a provocation of the Wizards Guild. Confused, Rain wonders why wizards would be willing to take physically demanding jobs. But Malcolm threatens to stop every wizard in the Wizard Guild from ever working for him from now on. Eventually, our guy checks out the wizard's stats, and when he sees that his loyalty is pretty high, he figures out that someone must have riled him up. To calm him down, Rain explains that there's been a misunderstanding because he didn't mean to disrespect the Wizards Guild. Apparently, the 3 reasons he didn't want to hire wizards this time around are: firstly, the amount of mana is limited every day, and they may not be able to meet the deadline. Secondly, it's simply too expensive to hire a wizard, and with the same amount of money, he can hire 10 physical laborers instead. Thirdly, most wizards live a comfortable life from being a part of the guild already, but the normal civilians don't have such a safety net, and that's why he's specially considering them. Intrigued, Malcolm states with all due respect that magic is the rule of this world, and that those without talent for magic deserve to be beneath wizards. Rain agrees that he's correct, but he doesn't like it, and he intends to make everyone understand that wizards are no different from civilians, neither superior nor inferior. Shocked, Malcolm insists that the young master take that back, if he doesn't wish to make the Wizards Guild his enemy, but Rain asks him to mind the tone he's using, otherwise he'll ask his maid to cut his throat for insulting nobility. Immediately, Leah stretches a knife across the wizard's throat, and when Malcolm protests that this is nonsense, Rain cheerfully explains that he can slit his throat for insulting nobility by law, but he can ask her to cut his throat if he doesn't believe it, and they can see how the judge would address it in court. Scared, Malcolm immediately pleads that he spare his life and apologizes. Surprisingly, Rain notices that Malcolm's loyalty hasn't decreased even in such a situation, and he also considers him simple-minded because he was completely unaware that he was being used to start a quarrel. Eventually, Rain asks Leah to let him go, and Malcolm thanks him. Suddenly, the system announces that our guy has used the scanning ability on 10 people, and the reward pack has become available. A new quest to obtain 5 high-status characters has also become available. Shortly after, Eldritch runs into the guildmaster and asks how things went, but Malcolm states that Rain didn't listen to him and even chased him out. Surprised, Eldritch suggests that he has an idea to make Rain listen to him and even be more respectful to him. He suggests that when those peasants refuse to work for Rain, he will have no choice but to come running to him. Confused, Malcolm wonders why the people won't work for the young master, since he has such a good offer. So Eldritch hints that Rain would be bound to be disappointed in the peasants if all they do is lay around. Surprised that Eldritch is hinting that he uses magic to affect the workers, Malcolm clarifies that he was merely displeased that Rain refused to hire wizards, but he doesn't want to sabotage him over this. However, Eldritch reiterates that the peasants are a bunch of good-for-nothings anyway, and that's the reason they're starving, so there's no need to let useless people help Master Rain build the dam. When he says that, Malcolm hesitantly considers giving Eldritch's suggestion a try. Sometime later, people gather around a public notice board about how the new lord is hiring people to build a dam, with 3 meals a day and good wages of 10 copper coins paid at the end of the day. Some of the men wonder if the new lord is really this nice, and they refuse to go, because the nobles have tricked them plenty of times before. Immediately, Lillian, who is standing among the crowd, stops them from slandering the lord, because Master Rain had told her that he's going to make everyone's life better. However, the men begin to laugh and wonder what a little girl like her knows, and they accuse her of having feelings for the pretty boy. Regardless, Lillian states that she and her father would like to apply to the dam project. The attendant explains that her father can be accepted, but she can't. Confused, Lillian asks why, since she's pretty strong, but the man clarifies that the master had explicitly stated that they can't hire people below the age of 18. When her father steps up, the attendant lists out the terms of the job and gives him a paper to make a handprint on before he resumes work the next morning. After he does, Lillian reminds her dad that he has to work hard and can't slack off, so he assures her that there's no need to worry because he won't gamble again. Her father decides within himself not to let Master Rain down, so he asks Lillian to stay home and take care of her mother since she can't work in the field with her sickness. When the attendant overhears him talking, he stops Lillian's father and confirms he had just said his wife is sick, when he confirms his wife is very sick. The attendant informs him that Master Rain had stated that the families of those working for the dam project may temporarily relocate to the workers' quarters. Excited, the man kneels and thanks the attendant, but the attendant asks him to quickly get up and promises to get someone to take them to the quarters. When the other men overhear this, they suppose that the new lord may have good intentions after all, so they immediately get in line to sign up. Meanwhile, Rain checks out his new rewards, and he's told that he's received a blueprint of a lithium iron phosphate battery. Annoyed, Rain wonders what he's supposed to do with a battery blueprint without an electricity generator. He wonders if the system wants him to get struck by lightning to charge the battery. The other quest on the system requires him to raise and obtain 5 high-status characters, and he wonders where on earth he'll find people like that. Leah, who is 21, has almost maxed out her leadership strategy, strength, loyalty, and fearless divine thunder. Magic stats. He had considered training her, but she doesn't seem to have room to grow anymore. Eventually, he decides that he'll have to go into the city to scout for talents. Suddenly, he's told that Lillian has come to see him, and he asks that they let her in. When she steps in, she mentions that things are weird at the construction site because everyone is slacking off. Confused, our guy goes to check things out, and he finds Lillian's father, who promises that he's not trying to slack off, but he's been feeling tired since he woke up this morning. No one there seems to have any energy either, and Lillian screams at them for wasting such a good offer from the Lord, but they all lament that they've been feeling this way all morning. One guy suggests it may be because they've not worked for a long time. Annoyed, Lillian accuses them all of being lazy because there's no way they're all really feeling sick because of work, and she tries to convince Rain to speak to them. When Rain approaches Lillian's father and checks out his stats, he finds out that he has an anomaly on him. It's a curse. When he sees it, he informs Lillian that they're not sick, but are cursed. Immediately, Rain uses a skill called prospecting, which he was planning to use when the dam's construction starts. The prospecting skill allows him to analyze the state of rocks, strata, formations, minerals, hydrology, and landforms in a specified area. When he begins analyzing the geological condition of the area within a 10-kilometer radius, he spots that there's no petroleum or metal in the ground, which is a shame. Eventually, he runs into something interesting, so he finds someone to help him dig into that specific area, and after digging, they find a shiny object lodged in the ground. Leah is surprised that Rain was able to detect this because the magic from the object was so faint that even she couldn't detect it. Immediately, Rain orders them to dig up the crystal and put it in a box. He asks Leah what people normally do when they've been cursed, so she mentions that they can go to the church and have a priest remove it, or they can look for a high-level wizard from the Wizards Guild. Her mentioning the Wizards Guild gets his attention, so he asks Lillian to get her father and follow him, so they can go find a priest. Lillian is surprised that her father has been cursed, but Rain, who knows who's responsible for this, pledges that the person responsible will not get away with it. Shortly after, they reach the church, and one of the nuns welcomes Master Rain. Before he asks her to treat someone, he decides to check if her stats are good, and the system displays that she has really good stats and a very high loyalty status. Furthermore, he realizes she's an elf and not human, which really surprises him. The lady immediately introduces herself as Saintess Ayura from the church, and asks what she can do for him. He informs her that the man with him has been cursed, and he'd like to ask if she can do something about it. When Ayura hears that, She proposes that she inspect the man first, and she activates a very bright light from her eyes that confirms that the man is indeed cursed. Rain asks her if she can remove it, so she generates a golden energy ball and releases it towards Lillian's father. When the ball hits him, it ejects the curse immediately, and he feels a sudden surge of energy that makes him feel like getting to work immediately. Intrigued, Rain asks him to wait while they resolve things, so he shows Saintess Ayura the crystal they found at the construction site to know if she knows what it is. When the Saintess sees it, she recognizes the dark crystal as the most common magical crystal, and a huge amount of magic has been stored inside for the curse to take effect. However, she admits that it's more of a prank than a curse, because the caster is capable of killing anyone with the same amount of magic, but all he's doing is making people feel tired. Rain asks her if it's easy to manufacture this sort of crystal, so she admits that it will be very easy for a high-level wizard to make one and hide it in the construction site on a daily basis. Surprised, Rain asks her how she knows about his project, so she explains that the project will benefit the civilians greatly, so there's no reason she wouldn't know about it. Apparently, the pressure on the church is lesser because the project provided jobs for many people. Eventually, Rain realizes he'd have to teach Old Man Malcolm a lesson, so he immediately asks the Saintess if she has a way to remove the curse from the entire construction site. But she admits that it will be difficult because they may not be lucky enough to find the crystal again the next day. It would seem that Rain would have to approach Malcolm about this, but Saintess Ayura suddenly informs him that she knows someone who can solve his problem. But the person is a little strange. Regardless, our guy agrees to meet the person. So he's given the address of Lady Selena, the former president of the Wizards Guild. So he goes to her house to persuade her to help him. The moment he knocks on the door, Leah senses danger, so she jumps on Rain and warns him to be careful. Immediately, an explosion occurs on the upper floor, which makes Rain confused as to what is going on. Suddenly, a figure appears out of the explosion, and angrily wonders why what she was working on fell again. It turns out to be Lady Selena. She pledges to work tirelessly until she crafts her project successfully, even if she has to level the entire Ealing City. When Rain eventually enters and asks for her help, Lady Selena utterly refuses because she's busy researching a new magical device and she has no time for him. Intrigued, our guy asks her if she's talking about wands, but the lady tells him not to insult her with his lowly understanding. Annoyed, Leah asks the lady to watch her tone while speaking to young Master Rain. Selena compliments Leah because she's carrying great magic in her, and she proposes that Leah stay with her as an assistant and she'll help her little master once she's succeeded with her project. That comment further annoys Leah, so she activates her aura and proposes to teach the lady how to be polite. As both ladies prepare for a showdown, Rain calms Leah and clarifies that they're here to ask for help and not to cause trouble. Our guy notices the things on the table and asks Lady Selena if she made them all, and if she's making a magical item. She impolitely commends his ability to recognize those again, but explains that the items are all failures. Apparently, she's trying to create a device that can store the powerful electric magic within her. The mention of storing electric magic shocks Rain, and when he asks her more questions, she clarifies that it doesn't work and keeps resulting in an explosion. Eventually, she asks them to go now so she can rest and return to her research. Shortly after, Rain asks her if she will help deal with the wizards if he tells her he can create a device that can store electricity. Enraged, she warns him that she has no time for nonsense, but he assures her that he's serious and asks again if she will help him if he can help her. When she sees he's serious, she agrees to not only deal with the dimwit Malcolm, but to make the Wizard Guild listen to him. Sometime later, Rain returns with the batteries that he had built according to the blueprints he received. Although he was wondering where he could find electricity, it would seem that the wizards can substitute as human electricity generators until hydraulic generators are built. Intrigued, Selena warns him that there's no way these rocks can store magic, and they'll explode even if she uses a little magic. But Rain assures her that the capacity of the battery is about 185 watt-hours per kilogram, so he asks her to show him how much of it she can charge. Eventually, she grabs the cords and proceeds to see how powerful it is. The lady begins to release her electricity into it, and she's shocked that the battery doesn't explode. When she stops, Rain playfully asks her if that's all she's got, since that's not even half of what the battery can do. Riled up, she calls Rain a brat and promises to wipe the smirk off his face, so she begins to pump the battery full of electricity. Sometime later, Selena collapses out of exhaustion and she begins to wonder if this object can really store her magic. When Rain checks out the percentage, he notices it's at 87%, which is a shocking figure that is enough to power an electric vehicle for more than 3,000 kilometers. If she can get it to 87% just by herself, it means these wizards are convenient human battery banks, and he'll be able to use their talent. When he joins the cords of the battery pack together, it releases a spark, and Selena incredulously asks him if he can also use electric magic too. Amused, our guy assures her that he can, and can also make it so that everyone in the city of Ailing can use electric magic. Intrigued, the lady calls that nonsense, because magic cannot be learned so easily. But Rain assures her that he has magic devices more powerful than this battery he brought, and he offers to show her a world where everyone can use magic if she's willing to help him, and that blows her mind. A while later, at Malcolm's home, he hears a knock on his door and assumes that it's about time for Master Rain to come begging for help. However, he's shocked to see President Selena. She doesn't answer him, but accuses him of having some guts to stand up to the young lord of the Duke's family, and she asks him if he's trying to rebel, afraid. He clarifies that he would never dare to think of something so dangerous. But Selena soon grabs his cape and asks him to spill what kind of dirty trick he used at the young lord's construction site. When he hesitates to answer, streaks of red lightning emanate from the lady's body, and she reminds him that she knows he's aware she has a bit of a temper. Suddenly, Malcolm bursts out in tears and agrees to talk if she spares him. Apparently, he gathered all the mages from the association and told them that Lord Rain looked down on them, which made them furious. Then, he had them create crystals that could cast curses and use teleportation magic to place them underground at the construction site. The crystals made the workers exhausted, and he hoped that would make Rain think the workers were lazy and useless, so he would come back to apologize and agree to work closely with the Mage Association from then on. As tears flow from his eyes, he swears that this was all, and he had no other intentions. But Selena calls him an idiot, because he doesn't realize he was being used. Confused, Malcolm asks her who used him, but she only tells him to go back and call those troublemaking mages, which he does immediately. Shortly after, Lady Selena speaks with the young lord through a magical hologram, and she informs him that she's taken care of the problems with the Mage Association. The news pleases Rain, and he thanks Selena for her help. Eventually, she asks him if he'd like her to deal with Eldritch, because she can make him disappear without a trace. But he responds that there'd be no need, because he needs Eldritch to lure out an even bigger fish. After hearing that, Selena decides to back off from the issue, but before they end their call, she eagerly asks him when they can start working on those new projects he mentioned, and pleads that he call her when he decides to begin. Our guy assures her he will, but he asks her to ensure that the mages from the association fully charge those batteries, which she excitedly agrees to. Sometime later, Eldritch reports to his master that it seems the kid has taken control of the Mage Association, and he asks what he thinks they should do. However, his master replies that there's no rush, since there's nothing worth worrying about in the Mage Association other than the old hag Selena. The master informs him that he needs to forget about those minor mages, because he needs to be more concerned with the mysterious dam project. If the dam works as the young master claims, it would revitalize the people of Ealing City, and they can't let that happen. When Eldritch hears that, he assures his master that he set a trap for the young lord. Apparently, he's been secretly pressuring the nobles in charge of the grain supply to raise prices according to his wishes. Eventually, the master asks him if he's certain that the nobles will side with him, so Eldritch replies that they will, because he's helping them make back the money the young lord took from them at the banquet. Even though they can betray him, they'd never betray their own profits. With this, he'll ensure the young lord doesn't have enough money to keep the dam project going until it's finished. Sometime later, a trader kicks Lillian away from his shop and tells her to leave if she can't afford the merchandise. She falls to the ground and protests against the sudden price hike from 1 gold coin for grain to 2 gold coins overnight. Regardless, the trader tells her to save her whining, because he'll sell the grain for whatever price he wants, and they can leave if they can't afford it. Lillian recalls that she had asked Rain to leave the job of buying grain to them, because they'd get it at the lowest price and save money. Annoyed, she calls the traders greedy crooks, and asks them if they're not afraid that Brother Rain will deal with them. But the man explains that they're just honest business people, and the Grand Duke's son can't do anything to them, as he states that this is a grand opportunity, and they're taking full advantage of it. He further steps on Lillian, whom he had kicked to the ground, while the crowd watches angrily. Sometime later, Saintess Ayura protests that the humans are getting more and more out of line because the price of grain has tripled in just 3 days. She tells one of the people working at the church named Ilaria that the grain they got won't be enough for their people to survive the winter. She instructs Ilaria to take the supplies in and hands her some money, but Ilaria protests that they won't even pay a third of this when they bribe the guards normally. However, the Saintess asks her to do as she said. Moments later, Leah walks up to the Saintess, and Rain also follows behind with a bag of money in his hand. When the Saintess sees him, he asks her if she'd be interested in making a deal. Intrigued, the Saintess asks the young master what business he wants to discuss with her. When he notices her tenseness, Master Rain tells her there's no need to be tense and refers to her as an elf. Surprised, the Saintess says that Rain is saying nonsense because there are no elves in the human capital. But our boy assures her that there's no need to be guarded because he knows they're elves and he bears no hostility toward their kind. After Rain tosses the bag of money in his hands to her, the Saintess finally asks what business he wants to do with them, so Rain explains that it has to do with food supplies. Surprised, the Saintess explains that this may be beyond his ability and pleads that he forgive her bluntness. When Rain asks why she said that, she explains that the food in Ealing City is controlled by the 4 major noble families. These 4 families have stood strong in Ealing for over a century, firmly controlling the city's grain prices. Although he had intimidated some people at the banquet a few days ago, those guys are just a small fry in Ealing City. Apparently, if Master Rain hadn't made a move against the Eldwin family at the banquet, there might still be room for negotiation. Due to war and natural disasters, food was already scarce this year, and the Saintess laments that her people could have barely survived the winter if grain prices had stayed stable. But it seems things will be worse. Regardless of all this, Rain assures the Saintess that the prices of grain in Ealing City will be cheaper than they were before the price hike, just within half a month. Meanwhile, the heads of the 4 great families meet to celebrate how they made an absolute fortune this time. They thank one of them, Augustus Claney, the head of the Klein family, for bringing them in on this deal. Suddenly, a butler enters and informs Lord Augustus that young Master Rain has sent an invitation requesting the presence of all 4 lords at a banquet. When they hear that, one of them wonders if Rain is planning to come after them next, and he asks Lord Augustus what they'll do, since they just want to make money and didn't plan to die. However, Augustus assures them that the city lord had assured him that raising grain prices was entirely legal and compliant. Apparently, as long as they don't provoke young Master Rain, nothing will happen, especially if the 4 of them stick together. He states that merchants set the price of grain, and even the emperor doesn't have authority to interfere, let alone some duke's youngest. When they hear that, all the men eagerly agree with him, and they celebrate the fact that they'll be saving their families from poverty for the next 100 years, based on this new opportunity, since they're now selling grain at 2 gold coins per sack. Lord Augustus suggests they drop it by 5 copper coins to appease the young master if he pushes them too hard, but he warns the others that he won't let it slide if any of them dares to back out from their agreement. So they all assure him that they'll stick with him till the end. After receiving their assurance, they all proceed to get changed so they can go to the young master's banquet. That evening, Leah comes to notify the young master that Lord Augustus and the others have arrived. He immediately orders one of the workers to tell the kitchen to start serving food, and the lords enter the hall soon after. The lords enter in commoners' clothing and greet the young master, but Rain immediately recognizes that they're trying to act poor in front of him. Rain pretends to be surprised and asks the men why they're looking so disheveled, even though they're the nobles who control Ealing's grain supply. However, Augustus doesn't answer the question, and just states that they'd like to contribute to the great project that they heard he's doing to benefit the people. One other lord adds that they've donated large sums of money to support the project, and have sold their grains at the lowest prices under the guidance of Lord Augustus. Nearby, Leah watches the shameless crooks and recognizes that they're blatantly trying to deceive young Master Rain. Regardless, Rain tells them that he's moved by their understanding and support for his efforts. Eventually, he explains to them that he invited them here to discuss some business related to grain, and Augustus excitedly states that they understand that he's been tight on funds lately. But 2 gold coins per sack is already a loss for them. As they continue to lament, Rain clarifies that what he actually wanted to ask is if they can raise the price of grain in Ealing City to 4 gold coins per sack. That statement shocks the lords. So Rain reinstates that he meant what he said, but he'll be taking a 30% commission. Still confused, Lord Augustus informs Rain that it would seem his hearing isn't what it used to be, because he's an old man, so he asks if he actually said to increase the price of grain to 4 gold coins. Rain agrees and reminds them that he's entitled to a 30% commission in this deal. That statement makes Augustus grin widely. He had originally thought that young Master Rain was just an inexperienced kid, but it looks like he's just as much of a cunning merchant as the rest of them. With the young master's support, the road will be much smoother for them, and Augustus wished he had known Rain was this reasonable before, so he could have visited earlier. However, without an official decree, they can't raise the prices, because if they do, a rebellion can break out and they'll be the ones to suffer. Eventually, Augustus thanks the young master for understanding his lowly servants, and he asks when the young master plans to post the announcement. Immediately, our guy informs them that the document is ready and stamped with the family seal, so they can put it up after they enjoy their meal. However, he clarifies that anyone who dares to disobey him starting from tomorrow will meet the same fate as the Eldwin family. So the happy men promise not to let the young master's kindness go to waste. That night, the 4 lords return home, and one of them asks Augustus if they should inform the city lord about this, because it's unusual for them to raise grain prices instead of lowering them. Suddenly, Augustus calls the man a fool and reminds him that the more people who know about this, the less profit the 4 of them will make. To him, he thinks Rain, who's a little brat, doesn't have much power, and he's trying to rope the 4 of them into his plan with benefits. Augustus insists that this matter remain between the 4 of them, and they'd be fools if they don't take advantage of such a great fortune. The man who suggested they report to the city lord calmly clarifies that he's never seen such a great opportunity before, and that's why he was cautious, but he pledges to follow Augustus's order through thick and thin, and they all promise to stand as one. Excited, Augustus suggests that they act fast before the announcement goes up and gather all the grain from those small merchants outside. Meanwhile, the Saintess calls Rain a traitor for not fulfilling his promise to lower the grain price. She demands to know why he's working with the crooked merchants, and promises to show him that the elves aren't to be trifled with. However, Lillian, who's standing nearby, calms the saint down, and reminds her that Rain had promised the price would come down. The angry saint insists that Rain is conniving with the crooked merchants, but Lillian equally insists that she believes Rain has a plan. When she calms down, Saintess Ayura asks Rain if he's really planning to raise the grain price, so he asks her not to worry about that, because the price won't stay high for long and the grain market will completely collapse in less than half a month. Surprised, the Saintess accuses him of being inexperienced and lacking knowledge about how cruel the world can be, because she's never seen grain prices drop after a major spike in all the 200 years she's lived. Eventually, Rain asks the Saintess what she thinks would have happened if he held a knife to the throats of the merchants, besides them dropping the prices by a few copper coins. Regardless, she insists that it's heartless to raise it to 4 gold coins per bag, because the people will begin to starve to death at that point. Eventually, Rain explains that they'd starve to death at 2 gold per bag, and they'd starve to death at 4 gold per bag. For the common folks, there'd be no difference between 2 gold and 4 gold, except for the fact that they'd just starve to death faster. The Saintess still doesn't agree, so Rain explains that he doesn't want the merchants to just reduce the price by a few coppers. He wants them to lose everything, including their families and their livelihoods. 7 days later, the young master goes to Lady Selena's house and explains the structure of a battery. When he's done explaining the science behind it, she's completely elated to be able to conceive how an intricate magic system like this works. Eventually, our guy concludes the lesson for the day, and Leah steps in to inform him that the Saintess is here again, ticked off. Rain asks if the Saintess doesn't have anything better to do, and Selena reminds him that it's because he raised the price of the grain on purpose, which has caused it to climb as high as nearly 7 gold per bag. Now, before Rain can explain, the Saintess barges in and reminds Rain that he had said he would bring down the grain prices. But at this point, even the small nobles are struggling to afford grain, let alone the commoners. Suddenly, our guy asks Leah how many days it's been since they started raising prices, so she tells him it's been 7. Eventually, Rain agrees that it's time to send those crooked merchants on their way. Still annoyed, the Saintess tells Rain to stop speaking in cryptic ways and threatens to sever all ties between him and the Elven clan if he doesn't explain everything to her immediately. Eventually, our guy explains that he hadn't told her before, so that her fake performance wouldn't arouse suspicion from the nobles, but the truth is that the thing their Ealing City needs at such a critical time when grain is high-priced is a merchant who sells grain. Rain further explains that the price of grain in Ealing City has risen to 4 gold per bag, and this has caused merchants in nearby towns to bring all their grains to the city to make gain. Since out-of-town merchants brought a large amount, the 4 families had to buy them at high prices, which further fueled the desire of the merchants. At this point, their city can be said to be the city with the most grain in the entire empire. Every merchant came here greedily because of the prospect of getting rich. Excited, our guy declares that the 4 noble families will be no more after today. So he gives Leah a notice to post all over the city about how Saintess Ayura is selling the church's reserve grain because she disapproves of Lord Rain's method, and she's selling it at 1 gold coin per bag. Confused, the Saintess reminds him that she doesn't have much grain, and he's expecting her to sell all the grain her people need for winter, so she declines. When she insists that the Elven tribe needs this to survive the winter, Selena jokingly calls her naive and advises her to listen to the young lord, so she can make a lot of money. Regardless, Ayura insists that the elves don't need money, but grain. So Rain assures her that she should trust him, because her grain will grow. Eventually, our boy reminds Selena to help him seal the city with the help of the Magic Association, so she promises him that no single rat will escape the city. Sometime later, Leah returns after sharing the papers, and Rain asks her if something is wrong when he notices her worried expression. Eventually, she spills out that she's worried that things won't go as planned, because the merchants might hold out for a few days until Ayura's grain is sold out. However, Rain assures her that the out-of-town merchants are blinded by desire, and they'll risk everything on this. They will fight to get rich overnight, and now that they know the prices will fall, they'll sell in a panic because being slow means death. Meanwhile, a man rushes to Lord Augustus to inform him that the church will sell its reserved grain at only 1 gold coin per bag. The lords tense up because they overlook the church and they don't know what to do, since they bought their grain at 2 golds per bag. Supposing the church grain will last only a few days, Augustus orders his people to go buy as much as they can. At the church, a crowd quickly gathers around and people begin to make demands for a high number of bags. The Saintess tells them not to push each other and assures them that the Pope has sent 10,000 bags because he knows the people are struggling. However, they still don't believe her and they each quickly try to get some before it runs out. While they're causing a ruckus, some soldiers come to silence the people and they bring in a new batch of grain provided by the Pope. The man informs her that this is the first batch and more grain will come in starting tomorrow, and the Saintess cheerfully thanks him, even though she's secretly hoping that Rain stops all this because she doesn't know what to say if the Pope finds out she's selling the church's reserve. The people rejoice at the sight of the extra grain, but the nearby merchants become worried that the church has messed up their business. One of the merchants calculates that he used about 75 silver coins to get a bag, so he considers selling his bags for 95 silver coins, which is less than the 1 gold coin of the church, so he can at least make a gain. He immediately begins announcing that he's selling at 95 silver coins, and he's soon surrounded by several men who ask him for some. When the other merchants see this, they become angry that this bastard is playing with them, so they begin selling theirs at 90 silver coins per bag, and not long after, another person goes as low as 79 silver coins. Nearby, Leah commends Lord Rain, because things seem to be going exactly as he said, and he replies that it's human nature. Since everyone is afraid of selling too late, they're desperately selling things. Leah soon realizes that the grain price will definitely return to 50 silver per bag, and then he'll be able to start his water project on time. But Rain thinks she's underestimating these merchants by thinking it'll only go as low as 50 silver per bag. He believes that when people like Augustus start selling, grain will be the cheapest thing in Ealing City. Surprised, Leah asks him if he really thinks Augustus and his crew would really sell out like the outsiders, since they paid at least 2 gold or more to buy it in the market, and also because they're a united group and wouldn't turn on each other. Amused, our guy tells her she's giving them too much credit because they can't be united when it comes to matters of profit. Since the grain prices in Ealing City won't cause any more trouble, he decides that it's time to talk to the Saintess about the second part of the deal. Meanwhile, Lord Augustus is soon told that the out-of-town grain merchants are slashing prices like crazy, and grain is now down to 75 silver coins per bag. But the Lord believes this is impossible. One of the lords named Roland wonders where the outsiders are getting their grain from when they control all the grain in Ealing City. But Lord Augustus just spends some time ruminating over the issue. Suddenly he has a eureka moment and realizes that young Master Rain is actually ruthless and wants to ruin their families completely. Confused. The other lords ask Augustus what's going on, so he explains that young Master Rain first spread the news that grain prices in Ealing City are skyrocketing, to attract merchants from nearby towns to bring their grain here. Once the merchants flooded the city, he used the church's name to crash the price and cause all the merchants to panic, so they sell at a loss to avoid losing money. When they realize that Rain used such a sneaky trick, Augustus points out that he has a plan that might help them turn the tables. Since the grain will only last the people of Ealing City a few months, they can hoard the grain until the people are desperate and sell it at a high price. He proposes that they stick together and refuse to sell today so they can make their money back, but they'll be doomed if any of them tries to sell. Eventually, Roland agrees that Augustus is right and informs them that he'll go home right away and order all the grain to be stored. However, he has other plans as he walks away because he knows he needs to sell immediately so they're not slower than the other merchants. As Roland walks away, the other lords suspect that Roland is trying to run away, and they also decide within themselves to do what will benefit them individually. They immediately ask to be excused so they can make arrangements for their grains to be stored, even though they have other plans. When they all leave, Augustus's butler comes to inform him that he'll go tell their people to ensure they don't sell any grain. However, Augustus kicks him in the face and asks him what will happen to him if he doesn't sell, and the three other jerks sell theirs. Surprised, his butler asks him what they'll do, so he orders that they sell all the grain immediately. Meanwhile, our guy gives the Saintess some grain and asks her if it's enough to get her people through the winter. Surprised, she wonders why it seems like the more grain they sell, the more they have. So Rain explains that it's because she's selling at peak price and buying at the lowest price, and that's enough to make her tens of thousands of gold. Suddenly, Lillian bursts in and informs young Master Rain that the price of grain has dropped again, and they can now buy 3 bags of grain for 1 coin. Excited, our guy reminds the Saintess that he had told her to wait a bit longer for the price to drop, but she didn't believe him. Eventually, he brings up the deal they had discussed, and the Saintess asks him what kind of deal he wants to make with the elf tribe. Oddly, Rain says he wants to make a deal about everything. By that, he means they can handle all aspects of the elves' daily needs, from small things like grain to big things like land or whatever else they need. Surprised, the Saintess mentions that this is too big a decision for her to make, and he needs to talk to their queen, so Rain suggests that she arrange a meeting with the queen for him. While the Saintess takes her leave, Rain considers that the nobles of Ealing City won't be able to cause any more trouble for a while after the grain crisis is over. The Magicians Guild is already under his control, and it won't be long before the churches too. Right now, Lord Eldritch only has the military and taxes as his remaining cards. If they can take control of the military no matter what Eldritch tries, he won't be able to escape. Our guy considers that they need to find a way to infiltrate the military. But while he's thinking, Leah pulls his head into her bosom because she thinks he needs to rest more, and she soon begins to massage his head to help him relax. And while he's enjoying it, a man enters and begins to lament to the Saintess about the damn soldiers who are abusing their power because of the Grand Duke's name. The man suggests that the Saintess ask the gods to strike them down with lightning, but she explains to him that the gods are merciful. Annoyed, the man explains that he can handle losses in Ealing City, but the soldiers went as far as robbing him on the way home, which is detrimental to his business. While he rants, Rain approaches and asks what's up. Still annoyed, the man asks who he is, so Rain says he's someone who wants to do business with him. Sometime later, Lillian takes her goods to the city again and soldiers stop her, asking what's in the cart. She clarifies that she's a citizen of Ealing City, and the cart holds goods she bought in the city, which she's taking to the elf tribe to do business. The grumpy soldier asks her if she thinks it's so easy to do business and orders the rest to search the carts. The soldiers immediately puncture the jars while Lillian pleads with them because she can't transport broken jars, but they don't listen. When they don't find anything, the leader amongst them tells Lillian to pay the toll to pass through, and she protests that they're asking for a toll after breaking her stuff. The soldier tells her to either pay up or get lost. But as Lillian attempts to argue, Rain, who's in the coach, asks her to pay them. Eventually, she hesitantly hands the man 1 silver coin. But the soldier informs her that young Master Rain raised the toll to 5 silver coins. That outrages Lillian, who protests that all her goods are not even worth up to 5 silver coins. But the man insists that she get out of the way if she's not paying. Eventually, she has no choice but to agree. Even though she knows the man is using Big Brother Rain's name to cheat people, she hopes Big Brother Rain completes his plan so he can deal with them all. After she pays the toll, they pass and continue their journey. Inside the coach, Rain speaks with the complaining merchant, who doesn't know his identity, and tells him that this young Master Rain must be something for raising the toll so much. However, the man asks him to watch his tone, because the young master is the savior of Ealing City, and he mustn't dare insult him. Surprised, Rain calls him strange, since he blames the soldiers after hearing them say the young master made them raise the toll. Amused, the man assumes Rain is new in the city, and tells him how the young master used a brilliant plan to bring down grain prices, even though he himself had lost money because of it. The merchant admits that it's the first time he's seen a lord who cares so much about his people, and the man excitedly declares that he'll serve Rain with all his heart, if he ever gets a chance to meet him in person. To further probe him, Rain mentions that he heard that this young son of the Grand Duke killed people at the banquet, and forced citizens to dig for some project. When the man realizes he's talking about the Eldwin family, he mentions that they deserved it. Intrigued, Rain asks him if he knows the family, so the man informs him that the Eldwin family was famously known to have made their fortune from casinos, even though that's not true. Our guy asks him to tell him more, and after looking around to ensure no one is listening in, the man divulges that the Eldwin family's real business is human trafficking. Surprised, Rain asks him to repeat what he said, and he's annoyed that his population is already low, and the Eldwin family would dare mess with his workforce. They need to find a way to control the border guards first. Otherwise, if there's internal chaos, it'll be hard to prevent other countries from taking advantage. Suddenly, they overhear Lillian arguing with some other soldiers as to why they're charging them tolls again. She explains that they already paid the toll when leaving Ealing City, but the soldiers explain that the toll for Ealing City is different from that of the border fort. Annoyed, Lillian accuses the man of lying, especially since they only had to pay the toll once before. But the man tells her to get out of here if she can't pay it. She becomes frustrated and eventually asks how much the toll is. As her hands tremble in anger, with a smirk on his face, the man states that the fee is 1 gold coin, and Lillian erupts in anger again, accusing the man of robbery. When he grows impatient, Rain asks Lillian to just pay them. But when the soldier realizes there are people in the coach, he orders everyone to come down, because all travelers that come to the border fort must be inspected. Since he wants to inspect them, Rain and everyone else come down, and he asks the soldier to inspect as he wishes. Confused by Rain's expression and affluence, the soldier asks him who he is. Suddenly, the soldier recognizes the merchant Rain is with as Trist, and he asks him how he dares come here. Our guy asks Trist if the soldier is an acquaintance of his, so he whispers that these people used to be bandits from the nearby mountains. They later cooperated with the Eldwin family and were later responsible for human trafficking. Eventually, the soldier mentions that Trist didn't pay enough tariffs the last time he went out of the city, and that made his superiors scold him, so he slaps him, and states that he won't be able to leave today, if he doesn't make up for the money. However, Trist protests that he's saying nonsense because he paid him the exact amount he asked for back then. Regardless of all his explanations, the soldier insists that he's going to increase their toll because of Trist, and they'd have to pay 5 gold coins now to be able to leave. Surprised, Rain asks why the tax revenue of Ealing City is so low if their tariffs are this high. The soldier is startled by Rain's statement, but he's suddenly struck by the sight of Leah, and he marvels at her beauty. Immediately, Trist offers to give him the 5 gold coins, and pleads with him not to make things difficult for his business friends. When the soldier receives the gold, he stows it away and walks up to Leah to ask where she lives. As he stretches his hand to touch her, Rain catches his hand midair, and comments that he was originally considering turning him into a free labor force, but it seems that he's completely hopeless. The shocked soldier attempts to strike Rain out of anger, but he's soon immobilized after Leah slits his throat. As the soldier falls to the ground, the other comrades watch in horror. Rain immediately orders Leah to kill all the resistors, and to station the escorts they brought at the border, to take charge of guarding it. Before Leah can respond, the other soldiers throw away their weapons and run away to call for help. As they frantically scream for help, Leah easily catches up to them, slits one of their throats, and cuts down the others in one fell swoop. While that's going on, our guy checks their status on his system and realizes that they have terrible stats for soldiers. He recalls that his father had warned him not to cause a dispute with the neighboring country, which is an enemy, and Rain realizes that he would have lost if he hadn't been warned by his father, and he had caused a dispute. As Leah approaches the wounded soldiers to finish her business, a brash voice from nearby demands to know who dares cause trouble at the border of Elling City. The men rejoice that they're saved, and they plead with Caesar to come save them, excited that their general, a guy named Caesar, is coming. When Caesar steps forward and asks again if they're the ones causing trouble at the border, Rain checks out his stats and is intrigued by his really high stats, even though he's not very big on loyalty. Immediately, Rain asks him if he's the Caesar of the Hulker family, and states that he has a brother who works in Priya's territory. Surprised, Caesar asks him how he knows about his brother, so Rain informs him that Priya Edgar is his older sister. It suddenly occurs to the general that he's speaking with Master Rain, the youngest son of the Grand Duke, and the other soldiers realize that they're finished, because they've offended the wrong person. Caesar also remembers the letter he received from his brother a month ago about how young Master Rain will be coming to Ealing City in the near future, and he has to pay attention to protect his safety. Although a month ago the city lord had met him with a load of money to show him the city of Ealing would be relying on him in the future. The Lord had said the Grand Duke sent him to such an inhospitable place because he doesn't take him seriously, and it goes without saying that his strength deserves a higher status. Caesar agreed with him because he doesn't deserve to waste his life in a place like this. Immediately, he pulls his sword and accuses Rain of pretending to be the young master, and he orders them to kill this fake Master Rain to get rewarded heavily. Annoyed, Leah accuses Caesar of being overly bold, and she asks him if he's planning to rebel. The other soldiers plead with Lord Caesar not to do this, because this is a crime that will lead to the destruction of the entire family. However, Caesar reminds them that they've already violated the law by blackmailing the son of the Grand Duke, and they aren't safe. He also reminds them that Rain wiped out the entire Eldwin family and ruined the Four Lords. Since this is the westernmost part of the Kurdoral Empire, and they have all the wealth they have looted here over the years, they can take Rain's head to the Orvis Empire in the north, and live a happy life as a minor noble. The general asks them to choose between life or death, and after carefully considering it for a while, the men harden their minds and decide that the general has a point. So they all take up their arms and decide to follow the general with one accord. Shortly after, Caesar asks Rain if he has any last words before he dies, but Rain replies that he will give him a chance to turn a new leaf if he mends his ways.